Hi, friends. We at GLC would like to take a quick moment to thank you for watching our programs on this platform, and we'd like to ask you for a little favor. Would you please go beneath this video and click the subscribe button? Did you know that by simply subscribing to the GLC YouTube channel, you can help us financially support the programs on this platform? You'll need to be signed into YouTube beforehand. But if not, simply click the subscribe button and YouTube will automatically walk you through the steps to sign in or to create an account. By taking these simple steps, you will not only ensure that you continue to receive our unique programming and gain instant access to the hundreds of videos we post, but more importantly, you'll also be telling YouTube that GLC's content is worth watching and promoting. Likewise, if you enjoyed a specific program, please click the thumbs up button below, which also helps inform YouTube that this is a program worth recommending. Finally, once you have logged in and subscribed, please click the notification bell below in order to receive announcements when we post new content. As usual, feel free to post your questions and comments in the comments section below. We always love hearing from our friends and viewers. Again, thank you for watching and supporting God's Learning Channel. We couldn't spread the message of the gospel without you. Be blessed, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Light of the Southwest here on God's Learning Channel. I'm your host, Eric Espatia, and today it's my privilege to introduce our esteemed guest, Mr. Joseph Good of Hatikva Ministries. Joe is a seasoned Bible teacher and a prophetic voice who frequently appears on GLC, including as a co-host on a program, Return to Zion with Rabbi Yehuda Glick. His deep understanding of both Jewish traditions and Messianic teachings make him a uniquely equipped person to guide us through today's discussion. Today's conversation centers on one of the most talked about and debated prophetic signs in recent times, the Red Heifer. Please join me in welcoming our guest, Mr. Joe Good. Joe, welcome to the show today.
Well, thank you, and shalom to everyone. And I'm very excited to be here, and I've always loved GLC and the mission of GLC.
Amen. Yeah, I know it's always about current events and making sure that, our Jewish brothers are put into the right light, and they are an amazing nation and good people. And how does Christianity come alongside and partner with them is usually our mission here on GLC.
Well, very good. One of the things that I'd like to say is that for myself, back when I first became a believer, I had a call from God that I knew was from God to research and learn the temple. And so that has been close to 40 years ago. And my life has been directed towards that. And so as a consequence, it's brought me into contact with people that are involved with the Red Heifers, the search for a valid Red Heifer, and also going in and looking at all the various texts on what pertains to the Red Heifer and why it's important. And especially in this day and in this time, there is a massive move that is taking place in Israel towards the rebuilding of the third temple. And the Red Heifer plays a vital part in that. And so I'd like to, through this program, lay out some information that will give people some things to look at and consider.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Okay. I think on the Red Heifer, the very best place to start is in the Scripture. And I'm going to be reading from Numbers 19. Now, I'm going to use the GPS, or Jewish Publication Society translation. I normally use, when I'm speaking to a Christian audience, I normally use a New King James. But some of the words that are translated in New King James in this particular chapter, they're not as good as what we see in the JPS translation. Okay. Now, I'd encourage people that a great thing about television is you can go back, you can watch it, you can watch it, reload it. You can go in and you can take notes. And I would encourage people to check out the references, and you want to have good references. Okay, so it's going to be spoken of in Numbers 19. Okay, and so I'd like to read the first few verses and we'll kind of comment as we go along. And so, Eric, if you have any questions or any comments that you want to have, please jump right in.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so it starts off, and the Lord spoke to Moses and unto Aaron, saying, this is the statute, and the word there is hukat, okay, which it's a commandment, but it's a special, the most intense commandment, or what we call the hukim, okay? And when we have a hukat commandment, is something that we can understand the mechanics of, but how it does the spiritual act, we're not sure. Okay. And so it's going to be a hukat of the Torah, of the law, which the Lord had commanded, saying, speak unto the children of Israel that they bring a red heifer, faultless, wherein is no blemish, and upon which never came a yoke. And you shall give her unto Eleazar the priest, the Cohen, and she shall be brought forth without the camp, and she shall be slain before his face. Okay, so the first thing that we will have to define as we go along is what defines the camp. Okay, all right, let's go ahead and talk about that right now. When Israel was in the wilderness, you had they were all together.
Right.
And let me ask you, in the wilderness, do you think they had some kind of a wall around the camp?
The maybe around the Mishkan in the center of the camp, but I don't think they had one around the outside of the camp.
That's what I thought for a long time. But there's a verse in Exodus 32. That's the chapter that deals with the golden calf. And if you remember, Moses came down from the mountain. He had the tablets of stone, and he's very upset. And it says he stood in the gate of the camp, and he said, everyone who disagrees with everything that's going on here and agrees with God and himself, come to him. And the whole tribe of Levi, they came and stood with Moses. And on that day, that's the day that Aaron and his family are going to be set apart as priest. Okay. So there was some kind of barrier. We don't think they had like brick walls and things like that, but maybe a brush barrier that is a boundary that defines the camp. Now, when they move into the land of Israel, okay, when they move into the land of Israel, the tabernacle, the Hebrew word for tabernacle is mishkan. And what mishkan means, if people know the word Shekinah, okay, or what's called the Shekinah glory, all right? That is a made-up Christian term. There is no such thing as the Shekinah glory. In Hebrew, the Shekinah is called the Shekinah, and it means the dwelling presence. The glory is called the kavod. There's two different ways that the Lord manifests himself. Okay, so the Shekinah means the dwelling presence. So in Exodus 25, God tells Moses, he says, make me a mikdash, a temple, so that I might shekan, or dwell. Now you see, mishkan comes from the word shekan. Okay, Shekinah comes from the word Shekan. And again, it has a center of dwelling place. Okay.
Got it.
So, and he tells them to make the Mishkan so that he can dwell, and they have to do it just according to the way that he lays down. It says, and just so shall you do it. They can't change it. Okay, so when they move into the land of Israel, they're going to spend 14 years conquering the land under Joshua. But the people are spread out. The Mishkan was at Gilgal. Okay, and so
Yeah.
the Mishkan after that will go to Shiloh and be there for 369 years. Now, the camp, if you're a leper, you have to be put out of the camp. What does that mean? If the camp was the whole land of Israel, then that would be pretty unreasonable. That would literally mean to be put out of the camp, you'd have to leave the whole land of Israel. Okay. So the camp was redefined as, when it was at Shiloh, as long as you could see the Mishkan, that was the boundary of the camp. Okay.
Okay.
When they were moved to Jerusalem, the walls of the city became the camp. Okay. So if you were outside the walls of the city, you were outside the camp. And so that's going to become very important as we talk about the red heifer. All right. So I'm going to go back to the text here. And it says that you shall give her, meaning the red heifer, unto Eleazar the Cohen, the priest, and she shall be brought forth without the camp, and she shall be slain before his face. Okay. We're going to go to verse 4. And Eleazar the Cohen, or the priest, shall take of her blood with his finger and sprinkle of her blood toward the front of the tent of meeting. Now, the term for the tent of meeting is in Hebrew, Ohel Moed. And so it has to be in front, or literally that would be to the east of the Ohel Moed. All right. So I'm going to give the passages. I want to define the Ohel Moed very quickly. And I want to be sure that I give you the right references. This will be from Exodus chapter 26. In verse 7, it says, now Moses used to take the tent and pitch it without the camp, outside the camp, far off from the camp, and he called it the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting. And it came to pass that everyone that sought the Lord went out unto the tent of meeting, which was without the camp. Okay? So that's right after he comes down from Mount Sinai with the tablets and the golden calf incident. When he comes down, they start to build the Mishkan, and the Mishkan, or the tabernacle, is going to go in the middle of the camp. Okay, so I want to go to another passage. And what we're told, this is in Exodus 27:21, is that once the Mishkan was completed, that the Ohel Moed was moved into the Mishkan. Okay, and so I'm going to read one verse here. It says, in the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting, without the veil, that's the parokhet, that's the veil that you had in the Mishkan between the holy place and the Holy of Holies, which is before the testimony. The testimony is a reference for the ark. Aaron and his sons shall set in order to burn from evening to morning before the Lord. It shall be a statute forever throughout their generations on the behalf of the children of Israel. So the Ohel Moed moves into the Mishkan until they build the temple. And the temple is going to have the same thing. It has a holy place. That's where you have the table of the bread of the face, or the showbread. That's where you have the 7-branched menorah, the ark of the incense, a veil. Actually, there were 2 veils in the temple, in that room. On the other side was the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant was. Okay.
Right.
So let me go back to Exodus Numbers, Numbers 19. And so in verse 5, I'm going to read verse 4 once again. And Eleazar the Kohen shall take of her blood with his finger and sprinkle of her blood toward the front of the tent of meeting 7 times. Okay. Notice that it says it has to be done by Eleazar the priest. Okay. So it can't be done by just a Levite or another Israelite. It has to be done specifically by a priest. The heifer shall be burned in his sight, her skin and her flesh and her blood and her dung shall be burnt. And the priest shall take cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet and cast it into the midst of the burning of the heifer. Then the priest shall wash his clothes, and he shall bathe his flesh in water, and afterward he may come into the camp. And the priest shall be unclean until the evening. And he that burneth her shall wash his clothes in water, and bathe his flesh in water, and shall be unclean until the evening. And a man that is clean shall gather up the ashes of the heifer and lay them up without the camp in a clean place. And it shall be kept for the congregation of the children of Israel, for a water of sprinkling is a purification from sin. Verse 10. And he that gathereth the ashes of the heifer shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the even, and he shall be unto the children of Israel and unto the stranger that sojourneth among them for a statute forever. And there it says, Hukat le olam. It means it is a commandment that applies to every generation. He that toucheth the dead, even any man's dead body, shall be unclean 7 days. The same shall purify himself therewith on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, and he shall be clean. But if he purify not himself the 3rd day and the 7th day, he shall not be clean. Whosoever toucheth the dead, even the body of any man that is dead, and purifieth not himself, he hath defiled the Mishkan, the tabernacle of the Lord. That soul shall be cut off from Israel, because the water of sprinkling was not dashed against him. He shall be unclean. His uncleanness is yet upon him. Okay, so that's our primary text. Okay, first off, the red heifer has to deal with what is called corpse impurity. Okay, so Eric, have you been to Jerusalem?
I have.
Oh, all right. Okay, did you go up on the Temple Mount?
No, I was not able to go up to the Temple Mount.
Okay. Well, you certainly have seen it and seen pictures of the Temple Mount. Today, there's the Dome of the Rock, and the more important Muslim mosque called the Al-Aqsa at its southern end. The Dome of the Rock is towards the middle, but it's a huge area. Do you have any idea how many acres it would cover?
No, I don't.
Okay, it's going to be 35 acres in size. It was the largest temple anywhere in the world until its destruction. Okay, so now we have 3 main courtyards on the Temple Mount. You have what's called the outer court, and that's going to constitute most of that 35 acres. Then you have anybody can go there as long as you don't have an impurity. Okay, so you can even go up there in the outer court if you have corpse impurity. Okay, so you get corpse impurity by being in contact with a dead individual, not a dead animal, but a dead person, or if you go to a cemetery, you immediately get corpse impurity. Okay,
Right.
So you can go on the outer courts with corpse impurity. We have 4 other impurities that you cannot be on the Temple Mount, period. okay, in any of the courts. Now,
Can I ask one question? Can I ask one question, Joe?
you can ask 1,000.
Okay, let me ask one question. So just so everyone's listening, so we're talking about the impurities that would have been allowed in that time of the temple operating. Today, from what I understand today, everybody's ritually impure. Everybody is everybody is not, we're all defiled on some level today, but you're saying back when the temple was operating, you're saying these were where you could go if you were ritually impure, and where you could not go. Is that correct?
Right. Let me read
Okay.
something to you to answer your question. Okay. Now, all right, let me get the right book. This is what we call Mishnah. Okay. Now, this is just one volume. Actually, it's going to be this particular one. Yeah, this is all one volume of the tractate called Kelim. Okay. Now, and this is the Kahati translation of the Mishnah in Hebrew and English. And there's 22 books in the Kahati Mishnah. Okay. So you get an idea. It's a library.
Yeah.
What these are, they are the legal decisions that were passed by the Sanhedrin. Okay, so they're not just a collection of what this rabbi or that rabbi said. It's kind of like the American court. You have a recorder, and they record everything. Okay, and so this is the highest court of the land. And so their job was to take the commandments, and they were to define how we keep those commandments. And so in the case of the temple, in First Chronicles 28, we're told that King David was given by the Holy Spirit, it says the Ruach, the plans for the temple. It's actually a blueprint. It's called Tabnit. And it lists off the temple building. That's going to be how high it is, how wide it is, how many rooms are in, everything about it. Okay, and then the courtyards of the temple, the buildings, the gates, all of that was defined. And it was a Tabnit, which they couldn't change. They had to do it the way that God gave it to them. As you go down in verse 13, it says he gave the services of the temple. It's called Avodah. Okay, so the Red Heifer ceremony is not going to be them defining how it will be. God gave them a blueprint of it. Okay.
Okay.
So I want to read out of this tractate, Kelim. It's going to deal with pure and impure vessels. And so I'm going to read from chapter 1 of Kelim, and this is Mishnah 6. Okay, that's kind of like we'd say verse 22. Okay, so Mishnah 6, it's 1:6. It says there are 10 levels of sanctification. In Hebrew, we call it Kedusha. And then it starts going through it. It says the land of Israel is more sanctified than all of the lands, and it gives the reasons. And it takes 2 verses and it says, for these reasons. Then it says, in the land of Israel, a city surrounded by a wall, more sanctified. And it says that because a leper cannot be inside a walled city, he has to be put out of the city. And also, a corpse, a dead body, had to be taken out of the city. Once it's removed from the city, they cannot bring it back in. That's what the Torah says. Right then, it's talking about Jerusalem. And here, this is Kelim 1:8. It says, within the walls, meaning Jerusalem, is more sanctified than these, for we may eat there holy offerings, not most holy. Okay, most holy have to be eaten by the priest and have to be eaten on the Temple Mount. And second tithe. The Temple Mount is more sanctified this for Zavim. So a Zav is a man that has a genital discharge. Zavot are going to be women that have an issue of blood outside their menstrual flow. Nido, women that are in the menstrual flow, and then Yodot, women that have a discharge due to childbirth. They are not allowed to go on the Temple Mount. Okay? So I'm going to go to the next one. And all right, the Kel. Okay, so I'm going to show on my model here. So on the model, we have a little platform. See this platform that's outside the walls. Now that platform looks real small here, okay? But the reality is this building is 22 stories high. This gate is 8 stories high. So take that into perspective. The Kel, which means the commonplace of the inner courtyards, is more sanctified than this. So it goes all the way around. This is the court of the women, and this is the most important court. It's called the Azarah. This is where the temple building, the altar is, and so forth. Now, it says that the Kel is more sanctified than the outer court. And it says, for Gentiles, a non-Jew, and one rendered impure by a corpse may not enter there. So if you have corpse impurity, you're not allowed to go into these courtyards, this courtyard or this courtyard. Okay. And that is the only place that we have where corpse impurity plays a factor. It's only on the Temple Mount. It's only when we have a temple that you have to be sprinkled with the ashes of the red heifer in order to be able to enter that area. Okay? Did that answer your question?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Anything else you want to ask on that?
No, please go. Keep going. This is great.
Okay. All right. So the red heifer has to be, I'm going to go back to the beginning verses, and we're told in the second verse of chapter 19 that they bring a red heifer faultless, wherein is no blemish, and upon which never came a yoke. Okay, so the requirements for the red heifer are extreme. It has to be a certain age. Okay, so what we're told in Hebrew, and I apologize for using so much Hebrew, but it's what defines the text. Okay, so it says this is the statute of the law. Okay, the hukat, which the Lord had commanded, saying, "Speak unto the children of Israel that they bring a red heifer." Okay, so a heifer is not a calf. A calf in Hebrew is called an eglah. Okay, and so a 3-year-old is considered a cow, a parah, whereas a 2-year and 7-month is considered a calf. Do you follow me?
Yes.
Okay. Now you're going to have to stretch on this one. They did not at birth, at 8 days old, that calf was considered 1 year old. So when we say a 3-year-old cow, that would be the way that we think 2 years and 8 days. Okay? That's what it has to be, the right age. You can't change that. You can't say, "Oh, I got this red calf and, she's good size and everything." She has to be exactly at least that old. Now it says that she has to be perfect. Okay. She has to be perfect. That means she has to be totally red. So she cannot have white hairs or black hairs. If she has 2 white hairs or 2 black hairs growing out of the same pore, this can disqualify her. They can come in and pluck those hairs. If red hairs come out after they pluck them, she's still qualified. But if white hairs or black hairs, then she's no longer qualified. That's why it's so hard to get a red heifer. It's not only that you get a red calf, it has to be totally red and it has to reach the right age. And the problem with the calves is the older they get, the more the tendency to start having white hairs and black hairs. All right?
Right.
Now, also, we have a requirement that she can't have any blemish. So she can't have warts. And cattle frequently have warts. Now, they can remove the wart if it doesn't leave a scar. Okay? So that's, it's very, very difficult. And the last thing upon which a yoke has never came, a yoke was never put on. She can't be used, and this is the way the Sanhedrin defined it, she cannot be used for man's benefit. Okay?
Got it.
So
Got it.
let's say that you have the man that was originally in charge of the red heifers in Israel to take care of them. He came here to my house and I did an interview with him. We spent a whole day interviewing, talking. We've talked on the phone many times, but he went into the detail of you can do anything for the cow, for the parah that benefits that cow. Okay. So you can go and you can brush her teeth or you can do anything. But let's say you can apply medicines to her and so forth. However, if you come and you start leaning against her, okay, that doesn't help the cow. That helps you. You're leaning against her because your back hurts. Then you just disqualified her. So the rules concerning the red heifer are really very, very, very difficult. And so I had the chance back years ago. They had their first red heifer candidate up by Haifa, and I went. In fact, Al Cooper and I went together with a tour, and we went to see the red heifer. I went 2 times to see her. Name was Melody. I talked with the rabbi that was involved with her, taking care of her. She disqualified. But she was, when that calf was born, she disqualified before she reached the age. But it was such big news, Eric, that it made the front page of the main Paris newspaper.
Wow.
And so it was big. Now, newspapers aren't that big anymore, but back then, that's what everybody used. We had a second red heifer, and I was involved. Rabbi Chaim Richmond was in charge of this one. And Rabbi Richmond and I were very good friends. And so I was involved with Primetime in raising the money for her down payment. And the day that she disqualified, we were going to take $10,000 for her down payment. Okay, she was going to be expensive, but she disqualified. They found Rabbi Richmond met me as we got off the bus, and he said, I think she's going to disqualify. And he showed me several hairs that he had pulled out of her. And that night they had a meeting of the rabbis is she still qualified or not? And they determined no, she was not going to meet the standard set by God. Okay, so the temple movement has been gaining momentum for quite a while, and everybody knew we've been praying for a red heifer. So 5 heifers were came from Texas. A man named Byron Stinson is the one that he had the heifers, and they sent a team of rabbis over, and they looked at the heifers, And it was quite a job of getting them moved to Israel without disqualifying them. Now, in Israel, the man that has uh, kind of kept us all informed. There is a news source called Israel 365, and one of the writers is a rabbi. His name is Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz, and he and I have been friends for a number of years. I met him at a temple conference I spoke at in Jerusalem, and he was there to cover the conference. And we were sitting back looking at a model of the temple that was put out by one of the groups. And we started talking. And he turned to me and he said, excuse me for asking. He said, but are you Jewish? And I said, no. And he said, how on earth, have you gotten so involved in this? But God has just opened doors. And so I've been around the rabbis that work on that and had kind of been involved in the middle of it. But these 5 heifers really caused a stir when they came over. And I'm sure you probably saw the videos that came out and everything. That was Rabbi Berkowitz that put those videos out. And they were eventually moved up to Shiloh. And I tried to send some video this morning to Corey for us to use in the program, but I sent the email, but apparently didn't attach the videos. So I was going to show the red heifers. We were there in Shiloh last May, a year ago. And all 5 heifers were there in a pen. You could go and see them. Now, they have, since that time, they have put a glass partition so people can't touch them. They don't want these heifers to get disqualified anyway. The Temple Institute is the organization that is in charge of the Red Heifer Project. They are in conjunction with another organization that's called Bonei Israel. And Bonei Israel basically were the initial ones that got the heifers, but they worked in conjunction with the Temple Institute. And then at a certain point, the Temple Institute took over. Now, back in what we have, the Ohel Moed, I'm going to show this once again, is going to be inside the temple building. So it's going to be inside this building. And I'll just take an ink pen, but it will be inside. This is called the porch right here. Now, we have a gate that is right. Let me turn it here where you can see it. See this gate? That gate in this model, we have to change it. And I'm going to show you why. Okay. The measurement that is used for the temple is called the cubit. And when I go and do talks on the temple, one of the first things that I ask people is, how big is a cubit? And I'm going to get 2 answers almost everywhere I go. One answer will be 18 inches. Okay. And the other is, well, from the elbow to the fingertip. Okay.
Right.
Eric, how tall are you?
I am 5'7".
You're shorter than me. I'm 5'9". Okay. Now, I have some friends that are well over 6 foot. You know, if we took a dozen people and we put their arms up from the elbow to the fingertip, we get a whole range of different sizes. Yes. But in the temple, everything has to be exact. Right. And so they had two measurements for the cubit that they used in the temple. There's more than one cubit. Okay, we have what's called the royal cubit. We have the 5 handbreadths cubit. We have the 6 handbreadths cubit. Okay, and so without going into a lot of detail, 2 of these cubits were used in the temple. One was the 5 handbreadths. The other was the 6 handbreadths. We now know the size of those cubits. The 5 handbreadths in inches is 19.2 inches. The 6 handbreadths is going to be 23.04 inches. Okay, so that's almost 2 feet for the 6 handbreadths. They use the 6 handbreadths up in this more important, the Azarah, the inner courtyard, and in the court of the women, they use the 5 handbreadths cubit. Okay? Now, do you remember when we were reading Numbers 19, that it said, I'm going to read the passage to you again. It's in verse 4, and it says, and Eleazar the priest shall take of her blood with his finger and sprinkle her blood toward the front of the tent of meeting, the Ochel Moed. Okay?
Right.
So, first off, he has to be east of the temple. It can't be west because God's throne is inside the Holy of Holies. And so the idea of God's face, he would be looking east out from the Holy of Holies. And so it has to be to the east, can't be to the west, it can't be to the north, and it can't be to the south, it has to be to the east. And so it's going to be on the Mount of Olives. The Mount of Olives is outside the camp. Okay? So I want to read. I'm going to go to the Tractate Parah. In Parah, that means the cow. This is the tractate on the Red Heifer. So again, this is out of the Mishnah. It's the legal decisions, the recorded decisions of the Sanhedrin. Now, in the case of when God gave ceremonies, they are not allowed to make decisions so much as they are required to record how it's done. All right, so I'm going to go to where it talks about where they slaughtered it. Okay, so I'm in the Tractate Parah. Again, that means cow. On the Red Heifer in chapter 3, Mishnah 6, 3:6. And it says, a ramp was made from the Temple Mount to the Mount of Anointment. Okay, in Hebrew, it's called Ha Hamishha. That's the Mount of Olives. By arches upon arches, with an arch directly above the post below because of a grave in the depths. On it, the Kohen who was burned the cow, and all who assisted proceeded to the Mount of Anointment. All right. And now let me go forward. Okay. I'm going to go to Parah 3:8. And it says, they laid their hands on him and said to him, my Lord, Kohen Gadol, immerse once. He went down, made one immersion, came up, dried himself. Wood was arranged there. Cedar wood and pine and spruce and smooth fig tree wood. They set it up like a tower and open windows in it with its forepart toward the west. Okay, so they're building a tower that the cow is going to be slaughtered there, and that tower is the firewood to burn it. Now it has to be facing towards the west. So you're on the Mount of Olives, east of the temple, it's facing toward the temple.
Right.
All right. They bound it, meaning the red heifer, with the Magog rope, placed it on top of the pile. Its head on the south, its face to the west. The Kohen, or the priest, stood on the east with his face to the west, he slaughtered with his right and received with his left. Okay. So again, when we read Numbers 19, it says you have one priest that's going to slaughter. You have another priest that is going to handle the blood. And he has to sprinkle that blood towards the front of the temple. Okay. And then you have a third priest who will gather the ashes. All three of these priests have to be without corpse impurity. They will become unclean in performing this ceremony. Okay. So he slaughtered with his right hand, and received with his left. Rabbi Yehuda says, he dipped and sprinkled 7 times in the direction of the Holy of Holies, dipping for each sprinkling. When he concluded sprinkling, he wiped his hand on the body of the cow, came down, kindled the fire with chips of wood, and Rabbi Akiva says with palm branches. All right, I have to go to another Mishnah. This is the Tractate Midot. And it's talking about the walls of the temple. Midot means measurements. And it says all the walls that were there were tall, except the eastern wall. Okay, so
Okay.
Eric, I'm going to put my model back up here.
Okay.
Now remember, this is only the inner courtyard, so we have a huge outer courtyard going around this. And we have an eastern wall over here. And that eastern wall, well, on back on this side, we're going to have where they killed the red heifer. Looking this way would be east. Okay.
Right.
And so we have to figure out, is it the outer eastern wall that isn't as tall, or is it the eastern wall to the court of the women, or is it the eastern wall of the inner courtyard? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do understand.
Okay. So all the walls that were there were tall except the eastern wall, because the Cohen who burned the cow would stand at the top of Har HaMishpah, the Mount of Anointment, and set himself to see the doorway of the sanctuary at the time of the sprinkling of the blood. Okay? So he has to be able to see. I'm going to take a pen. He has to be able to see right to here. That's where he has to see. So, okay. Now, we have this very strange thing. Let me put this where. Kind of complex, isn't it?
It is very, very complex.
Okay.
But
He has to see the doorway of the sanctuary. In that, he is fulfilling Numbers 19:4, where he has to sprinkle the blood toward the front of the tent of meeting. It means, actually in Hebrew, it says the pani, the face of the Ochel Moed. Okay. And so now I'm going to go back to the Tractate Kelim. And this is extremely exciting. I'm going to read something out of Josephus first, but I'm going to follow this up immediately with Kelim 17:10. Now, you remember Kelim is going to be a tractate of the Mishnah. And this is the Josephus. Okay. Now, there's like, 12 or 13 of these books about this size. And so it has the Greek on one side and it has English. Okay. So this is the Loeb, what we call the Loeb translation. And let me find my exact place I need. All right. All right. So I'm going to read several little passages here. It says, 15 steps led up from the women's compartment or courtyard to the greater gate. That's referring to these steps right here leading up to this gate. Now, in this model is built on my research. We've got to change it. We made a mistake. And I won't say we made a mistake. We have a new discovery. All right. And then it goes, all right. I'm reading from Jewish War, Book 5, and I'm reading paragraph 201 of the gates. 9 were completely overlaid with gold and silver. They were also the doorposts and lintels, but one, that outside the sanctuary, was of Corinthian bronze, and 4 exceeded in value those plated with silver and set in gold. Now that gate, we have a name for it. It's called the Nicanor Gate. It's named after the man that donated the doors. Now the doors of the temple are usually of the inner courtyard are 20 cubits high. That's pretty high. That's about 4 stories on a modern apartment building. That's about how high they are. But this particular gate, each gateway had 2 doors. Now, let's see, was a Corinthian bronze. And the dimensions of the other gates were all alike, but the one beyond the Corinthian gate, opening from the women's court on the east, opposite the gate of the sanctuary, was far larger, having an altitude of 50 cubits with doors of 40 and richer decoration. So they have this huge gate, gigantic, and it's 8 stories high through. So I want to put 2 and 2 together, and then I want to come to the last thing. We have this thing. He has to have a line of sight from where they kill the red heifer, and they're going to have one of the eastern walls shorter so he can see over it. That's a requirement. He has to look through that gate in order to be able to see the platform at the entrance to the temple. That's what he has to see. Now, I want to read from Kelim. If you remember, I said I was going to go to Kelim. This is chapter 17, Mishnah 10. Rabbi Meir says all the cubits were average, except those of the golden altar and the horn and the sovav and the yesod. And Rabbi Yehuda says the cubit for building was 6 handbreadths, but for vessels, 5. Now, I know people wouldn't understand that. So I'm going to try to give a very simple explanation. When it talks about the horns, the sovav, and the yesod, the outer altar has 3 parts to it. And the 3 parts, the foundation's called the yesod. The middle part's called the sovav. And at the top, the keren, that's the horns. And so it says all the cubits were average, meaning they were 6 handbreadths, except for the height of the altar. It was 5 handbreadths. Now, the altar is going to be 19.2 feet high. Pretty high. That's higher than telephone poles. And so here's the reason. They had to use the shorter cubit, the 5 handbreadths, on the height, because that line of sight had to go from the Mount of Olives over the eastern wall, through the gate, and over the altar to be able to see the exact point that he had to see.
Okay.
Are you understanding? Now, I went through all that for one point. I want you to see it had to be done just so. There's no wiggle room. They're going to extremes to make sure the heifer's killed at the right place, that the priest is qualified. He can't have corpse impurity. You say, wait a second. You said at the first of the program, we all have corpse impurity. Well, there are certain priests that do not. Let me read that to you.
Okay.
Okay. Let me find the right book, though. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the Tractate Parah, which deals with the red heifer. And so we have a situation. We don't have the ashes of the last red heifer. Okay? If we had the ashes and we knew for certain they were the ashes and that they had not been disqualified by any added substance, okay?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Then we could use them. Now, the rabbis made a decision back in the 1990s. There was a man, I knew him. I knew his son. A lot of people probably are aware of him, Vendell Jones. Vendell Jones was looking for the ashes of the red heifer. I was at Rabbi Richmond's house one day, and he and I were studying. I had gone over to Israel to study with him. And Vendell Jones called. And so he wanted to come by. Well, Rabbi Richmond said that, he wants to come by about the ashes of the red heifer. And he said, but the truth is, if we find them, we can't use them. Because who knows that might be the ashes of some other animal or ashes of wood, or how you're going to know that it's ashes of a cow. That's number one. Number two, how do you know that other ashes didn't get piled in that are not ashes of the red heifer? So in matters of doubt, they can't use it. Okay? So in the Mishnah, they said, what do you do if you don't have the ashes? Okay? All right. So in chapter 3 of the Tractate Parah, in the second Mishnah, it says there were courtyards in Jerusalem built on rock with hollowed space beneath them because of grave in its depths. In other words, to make sure there was no grave under it. They used to bring pregnant women. These are going to be pregnant priestly women who would give birth there and raise their children there. And they brought oxen with doors on their backs and children sitting on them, holding cups of stone in their hands. When they reached the Shiloach, that's the Shiloach pool, they alighted and filled them and so forth. Okay? Now, let me explain that. In order to have priests that are qualified without corpse impurity, they had houses. And they had these back in the 1990s. And because they started preparing for, we need a red heifer in order to have a temple. And so these women that were, the women were priests, okay? They didn't serve as priests, but their father was a priest, okay? And their mother was a priest. And so they went and they were pregnant. They would go to these homes and give birth there, and they would raise their children right there at that location. Now, the children grew up. They're never allowed to go to a hospital. They're never allowed to go to a cemetery. They never attend a funeral. They are kept away from anything that would render to them corpse impurity. Let's say, I have corpse impurity. I'm going to a funeral tomorrow. And so I've had many times over, I have corpse impurity. If I came up to one of these priests that were raised in a corpse-free environment and I shook his hand, I could not give him my corpse impurity. The only way that he gets it is if he goes into a place where there's corpse impurity. All right. Do you
Yeah.
follow me?
I do.
Okay.
Let's just hold on for 1 second. This has been so good. I think we're going to have to go into a second hour. If you have been watching and you're enjoying this, make sure that you watch us on the second half here as we continue this discussion further with Joe Good. Thanks, everyone, for joining us so far. Hey, welcome back, everybody. I hope you've been really enjoying this segment that we've been doing with Joe Good. We've been going into depth about the Red Heifer. And as you know, Joe just has just a wealth of knowledge. It's just amazing. And so we're going into detail on ritual impurity and the strict requirements for the Red Heifer slaughter. So let's continue the conversation. Joe, you had just finished up telling us that, you know, in order to be like ritually pure or this sacrifice, we had to be on the Mount of Olives, and we needed to be able to see straight into the Beit HaMikdash from the Mount of Olives. This is very strict on how they could built the temple. They used different cubits for maybe the eastern side and different cubits for the western side that were different, so that the priest who was doing the sacrifice will still be able to meet the minimum requirement of being able to look in, if that's correct.
You've got it right. You've got it right.
Okay.
And but what? Just a question that I want to ask you: weren't you kind of amazed at all the detail of that the gate had to be configured just to allow this priest to be able to look to that spot? I
Right.
mean,
Yes.
yeah, it's
It
amazing.
was it was very
Oh,
good, and I think a detail that in today's sort of what's going on, people are reading and listening to a lot of different news things going on, especially with what seemed to be a practice run of a sacrifice, or what sounded like a sacrifice, again an offering for the Red Heifer, but it was all sorts of misinformations going on out there, and I think just these details of what is needed. And of course, let's continue the conversation, and then I'll let you give an answer to what's going on.
sure. Okay. There's several things that I want to draw from what you just said. Number one is that the red heifer is never called a sacrifice. Okay. The word in Hebrew for sacrifice. In fact, we prefer to not even use that word for the offerings in the temple. It's korban. And what korban means, it literally means to draw near. Okay. Sacrifice, Rabbi Richmond had said it excellent in one of his teachings. Sacrifice is what the pagans did. That's where you give something up to please God. Okay.
Right.
But the korban, the korbanot, the offerings, that was something that God told us to bring out of our love for him. And that the effect for the korban is actually a spiritual effect for us. It does something within us spiritually. But if it's killed outside the inner courtyard, okay, the Azarah, the courtyard with the altar, then it is not considered a korban. Number two is people will talk about the altar of the red heifer. There is no altar. In fact, the pyramid fire stack that we read about, it's in a pit. They has to be constructed in a pit. That's so that the ashes will collect into that pit, and they will bring them up. Now, once all this is done, the ashes have to be collected together. And let me go back to Torah, and give me a second to find my place. I can just tell you this one, I think. But what it tells us that that the ashes are collected together and they're going to be stored at 3 places. Okay. So the first place is on the Mount of Olives at the location where they killed the red heifer. That 1/3 of them will be stored there. A second third is going to be distributed among the 24 districts of Israel. Now, again, you remember all that the ashes of the red heifer are for is for entry into the inner courtyards to make one be free from corpse impurity. And by the way, the reason that you can't have corpse impurity inside the inner courtyards is it is a place of life and not death. It is like a picture of the Garden of Eden again. Okay, so the third, and I'll show you on the model, the third are stored in a little building right here. This is the eastern gate to the court of the women, and to the south of it, there's a little building, and they have windows in it, and so they could see the jars of ashes inside there. And the main place they will use the sprinkling is going to be as people come to the Temple Mount. Now, the ceremony uh, takes place. It requires 7 days, and so the first day, that if you want to go into the inner courtyard, you have offerings that you're bringing for either you're required or you're choosing to. Then you have to go and have to declare before the priest in the temple, not a priest that you meet on the street at a restaurant. Okay, has to be there at the temple. You go and you make a formal declaration. I'm being sprinkled. I'm here for the sprinkling of the ashes of the red heifer. And so they don't sprinkle you that day. You come back on the third day. The third day they sprinkle you, and they will make a statement. This is your first sprinkling. Then they come back on the 7th day and they sprinkle them. And at that, they now can enter into the inner courtyards. Now, you'll remember that it requires 3 priests, one to slaughter, one to deal with the blood, and one to gather the ashes. They all have to be priests. They all have to be clean in order to do that. In addition, they become unclean. But what we're told in Numbers 19, is that they will remain clean and have to remain outside the camp. In other words, they can't go in the walls of Jerusalem until they immerse. Okay, they immerse in a mikvah, and they have to wait for the sun to set. There's a term in Hebrew for it. It's called tuvel yom. It's unclean for a day until you've washed and the sun is set. And so they don't get corpse impurity by the 3 that participate in the ceremony of the slaughtering and the sprinkling and the gathering. Okay, and so all of these are very, very, very specific. Now we have the ceremony is very complex, as you can see. It's got so many things that are involved, and while people might think everything that I'm saying is very detailed, then in reality, I'm giving the Cliff Notes version. Okay,
Right. Yeah.
it gets really, really detailed because this is so important. Okay.
Yeah.
And there have been 9 red heifers slaughtered to date, qualified red heifers. The next one in the rabbinical writings, it says the 10th red heifer will see the coming of the Messiah. And so there's been a huge anticipation on this. Plus, there is a movement, to rebuild the temple. And it's gaining speed. It's accelerating. About, I'm going to say 5 or 6 years ago. And people can go, if you look up Eliyahu Berkowitz, Eliyahu Eliyahu Berkowitz, Berkowitz. And he'll come up and go back, and you can see all the articles he's written. And about 4 or 5, maybe 7 years ago, I'm not sure what year it was, they slaughtered a heifer. That was in conjunction between the Temple Institute and one of the professors, I think, from Borderline University. And they did this on a heifer that was not red. It was of a breed that was common in Israel back when the temple stood. It was the right age. It was the right weight. It had all of these things, but the cow had a terminal disease, and so they slaughtered her. And they slaughtered her, and they burnt her with the woods that were listed in the Mishnah. They had the tower built a certain, with it looking to the west with windows to let the wind go in to accelerate the fire. They had all kinds of things that they learned from that. They learned you don't just go in the next 4 hours and start collecting ashes. It's going to be too hot. You have to let it cool down for several days. And then you have to go in, and if there's any bone that didn't burn to ash, you have to pound it till it does. And
interesting.
So they took the ash and they measured how many sprinklings they could get from this much ash. And so it gave them a wealth of material. And Eliyahu Berkowitz, who I mentioned before, he wrote an article on it where he interviewed the professor. What are the goals? What are all these things? They learned tremendous.
Yeah.
So, in the 5 heifers that they had where several of the heifers had disqualified. They were not considered kosher for a red heifer, according to Numbers 19. And so they took one of these heifers and they did a second trial run. Okay. So first off, the heifer was disqualified. Her ashes cannot be used. And in fact, if one considers them as ashes that can be used, it is considered a sin. I'll get to that in a minute. It's called milah. Okay. And so so the second thing is they purposely did it in Samaria. Okay. In Judea, Samaria, what people used to call the West Bank. Why did they do it there? Because so people would know it wasn't done at it wasn't done on the Mount of Olives. It wasn't done east of the temple. The priest could not look on that line of sight that he's required to look. In other words, they purposely did it there so people would understand it's not a qualified red heifer. We are not doing a red heifer ceremony here. We are taking one of the heifers that has disqualified. We're going to slaughter her to go through and learn all these massive details so that when we do a slaughtering of a kosher red heifer, we don't make any mistakes. So that we know what we're doing. We know how it's done. And there was another benefit. The benefit is that in 1967, the Israeli army on June 7th in the 6-Day War, they got the Temple Mount. The paratroopers under Colonel Mati, Mati Moore. I'm sorry, but I forgot the colonel's name. He's a hero of mine, but I've been thinking too much about ashes and red heifer to keep everything straight in my mind. At any rate, the paratroopers went in 6-Day War, and the decision came down to go into the old city. Now, not one soldier had ever been in the old city. Not one of them. the Matigor, Colonel Matigor. And when they came in through what's called the Lion's Gate. And it's on the eastern side. It's also called the Benjamin Gate. They came through and snipers were shooting at them. And they didn't have any maps of the old city. And so they ran towards a gate there was a big gate with a wall to their left, about 50 yards from the gate. And they ran to take cover. And all of a sudden they came to that gate and they saw the Dome of the Rock right in front of them. And there was nobody up there. All the Arabs pretty much had left. And Colonel Matigor called on his radio back to the IDF headquarters and said, Har Habayit, the Temple Mount, is in our hands. And there was silence. Nobody was saying anything. And so he thought his radio was broken. And so again, he said, Har Habayit is in our hands. And he heard screaming and yelling and all kinds of things because they couldn't believe it when they heard. I mean, this was like within a minute of them entering the old city, the Temple Mount was in their hands. And so the chief rabbi of the IDF, Rabbi Goren, he wanted to rebuild the temple right away. And Moshe Dayan, who was the defense minister, did not want him to do that. Moshe Dayan was the head of the IDF. He did not want, and he actually gave the Temple Mount, the authority of the Temple Mount, back to the Muslim Waqf. Okay, so the reality was in 1967, the Temple Mount was ready for the people, but the people were not yet ready for the Temple Mount. And so God put it on hold. But back in the late 1980s and early 1990s, when I started going to Jerusalem and started going to the Temple Mount, I would go up there with Rabbi Richmond, and we would go up and walk around. And there was only a handful of Jews that would go at any given day. I mean, you might have 10 or 15 Jews in a week that would go up on the Temple Mount. Right now, there are thousands that are going. They now are praying. Back when we went, Corey went with me up there. And one time we had paid money to the Muslim Waqf to be able to film, and they came and they took the film from us and all kinds of things. We would get harassed all the time. It was horrible. Now people are able to go and they're able to pray and sing and actually lay down and prostrate on the Temple Mount today. There are movements all over for the rebuilding of the temple. And so the coming of the Red Heifers, when they came to Israel back a couple years ago, it was phenomenal. It was like this boost. So the ones that are wanting to see the temple rebuilt, they want people to start asking questions about the Red Heifer. They want to see, because it keeps bringing up before the public, we need God's temple. We need his house. We need that to return to the people. And so, but at the same time, that's one of the reasons that they did it. And, they let it be known. It was publicized. But people have been misplacing that information and saying, oh, they were really doing the ceremony up there at Samaria. That you can't. And I hope that, if you've been following, it has to be on the Mount of Olives. It has to be one that is certified by intense inspection to no white hairs, no black hairs. It has to be deemed qualified, what we would say kosher, and it has to be conducted by a priest in a certain way, and certain things have to be done. And they purposely did it up there so people would make that distinction. This is being done to bring it before the public, but also so those that are involved will know best how to perform the ceremony correctly, as laid down in Numbers 19, and what we see the Sanhedrin recorded for us in the Mishnah. And so now there is what is called, first off, the red heifer. The ashes of the red heifer, they are specifically, scripturally, it is specifically for the taking away of corpse impurity. Okay, and it's the only way to remove corpse impurity. It is not used for any other purpose. And so I want to read something to you. And I put together some information. All right, let me go down. All right. Now, I mentioned this before. There is a term in Hebrew that's called a milah. And I'm going to give two terms. Milah is one, and we'll talk about the second term in a few moments. But let me read this to you. In Jewish law, milah is the sin of deriving unauthorized benefit from property consecrated to the temple or offerings. This violation also applies to certain vows and involves paying for the benefit received, adding a fifth to the value. Bringing a guilt offering is atonement for an accidental trespass. The specific regulations for milah are detailed in the tractate Milah in the Talmud or in the Mishnah. What is considered milah? Using consecrated property. In other words, it's been dedicated to Hashem, dedicated to the Lord. Any use of property dedicated to the temple is called hekdesh. Now, let me spell milah. If people want to search it, you can just, it's easy to search. It's spelled M-E-I-L-A-H. The second term, hekdesh, it comes from the word kadosh. Most people know the word kadosh means holy. So the Ruach HaKodesh is the Holy Spirit. Hekdesh is for taking property dedicated to the temple for private purposes, and that any use of property dedicated to the temple, hekdesh, for private purposes is considered milah. Okay, so basically what this boils down to is if we have a red heifer and we say that we have the ashes of the red heifer, they are only allowed to be used for the consecrated purpose that they were set aside for. Okay, you can't use them for anything else. They can't be used for something in a museum where you charge admission. Okay, because that would be milah. They cannot be used for my goodness, you have joint pain. Let me put some of the ashes of the red heifer on that joint. Maybe it'll help.
Oh, sure.
That's milah. You are changing its consecrated, dedicated purpose. So you can't use them in praying for the sick. They're not for that purpose. And so it's a very, very big thing. Now, this particular sin, a milah, is considered, it's one that it was so severe that a person could be declared karet. That means they are put out of the community because of it. And so, it's something we don't want to play around with. And also, we have to be very careful. one of the things that when we use something that is dedicated towards God, okay, one of the things, especially in regards to the temple, we have to be extra careful in how we handle that item, in what we say about that item, because the Jewish people, or if we make light of it, if we say, oh well, it really doesn't matter or whatever, and we just come out, we're going to lose credibility, but with the Jewish community, and we don't want that. We want to treat the things that they take this very seriously. I take it very seriously. And all of us that are believers should take these things seriously. And this is where, the Zechariah 8:23, I think, applies. It says, in those days and at that time, that 10 men from the nations will grab hold of the corners of the garment of the Jewish man and say, let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. And this is something that we need to go and be hand in hand, step in step with the Jewish people, not let's invent new things for the Red Heifer. Okay?
Right.
So, your thoughts, Eric? I'm interested.
Yeah, I just feel like there has to be, the world is getting Israel is getting the world's attention with this heifer right now. It's very interesting that the five, I think at one point, five kosher red
Yes.
heifers, or at least came to the minimum age. They were ready, and at this time, it's happening, and like you said, for the first time in a very long time, the Jewish people since October 7th have been able to come up onto the Temple Mount and pray openly for the very first time. I went back in 2016 and 2017 to Israel, and then it wasn't very easy for any Jewish person with a kippah to walk up on the Temple Mount
Right.
and openly pray. But today they can. And then we
Yes.
have the news of the red heifer. I guess one of my questions to you, Joe, is in light of all the headlines and speculation, what do you believe Hashem is trying to say to his people and to all of us, the Christians? What is he trying to tell us right now? What is he using this for, in your opinion?
Well, okay. I'm going to answer with the question. In the Torah, we have commandments, mitzvot.
Yes.
Do you know how many there are? How many commandments that are in the Torah?
Yes, sir. It's a 613
Right.
mitzvahs.
Now, how many of those commandments are we unable to do today because we don't have a temple?
Most, I would say.
Well, there's 279 commandments we cannot do out of the 613.
Okay. That are temple specific, you mean?
Right. Yes, temple
Right.
specific. Okay.
Right. Okay.
We have to have a temple in order to do it. Or actually, we can start some things like in the book of Ezra, in Ezra chapter 3, verse 6. It says that they began the services of the temple. They built an altar, but the temple building was not yet built. The foundations weren't built. So we can actually start the process. There are certain things that we can do even without the red heifer. But we've got to have access to the Temple Mount to be able to come up and do it. And but that doesn't mean that just because we can do certain things that we're not supposed to be actively working towards the rebuilding of the temple. Now,
Right.
in the Torah, Moses goes up on the mountain, and where he goes up on the mountain to receive the 10 Commandments.
Right.
That's going to be in Exodus 25. So in Exodus 25, the very first thing that we see, Exodus 25, 1 through 7, God says through Moses, tell the people to bring free will offerings called turmot of precious cloths, gems, gold, silver, all kinds of things to build the Mishkan, to build the tabernacle. Now,
Yeah.
from chapter 25, verse 8 and 9, that's where he gives the command not only to build the Mishkan, but to build the temple.
Yeah.
And from that point, we have to go all the way to Leviticus 11, where he talks about all the different offerings, the incense, the washing, the garments of the priest, the buildings and the furniture, and all of these things. And so
Right.
he doesn't start giving other commandments till we get to Leviticus 11. Well, stop, wait, think about that. That's chapter 25. So 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39. Chapter 40, that finishes up Exodus. Leviticus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All of that on temple related items. Then he
Wow.
gives other commandments. So, what do we learn from that? The commandments, all these other commandments that we're doing, should be seen through the filter of the temple. The temple is where God is teaching, these are the things I want. And so, like the red heifer, like the showbread, like we could go through one after another things, and that's going to tie into all these other commandments out here. And so it makes the temple itself will bring understanding of God's kingdom to the individual in a way that you and I can't imagine because it's been so long since we had a temple. But that is one of the main things. We need the temple. We pray a prayer that's called Yehi Ratzon at the end of the Amidah, the standing prayers. And people pray this every day, several times. May it be your will, Lord our God and God of our forefathers, that the holy temple be rebuilt soon in our days and that the offerings be restored and that we could come up and participate in all these things. And
Yeah.
there is a belief that when the temple is fully operational and the people have the right heart, in Hebrew it's called kavanah. In other words, it's not enough that you just go and you attend the temple and you say these words and you bring these offerings. It has to be with the right intention, the right heart. When it does, when we have that, there will be peace in the world. Okay. And as you know, in the land of Israel, in the last 2 years, there's been a great spiritual revival. There are accounts all over the place of soldiers. They're seeing the hand of God, and they know it's God. And people that grew up secular are turning towards God. But it has not been a time of peace. It's been a time of a lot of death and a lot of tragedy. And we desperately need the Holy Temple. And we need in the Christian world that a lot of the things that people think they know about the temple, that they get off the internet and, places like
Sure.
that. It's time for us to do our homework and go, as we're told, back to the Jewish people and learn of these things and why they're there. And it'll change our lives and it'll change our world.
Yeah. I have another question. This is for the Mount of Olives and just kind of understanding the area, right? So the offering needs to be made on the Mount of Olives. You made that clear. But there are certain areas in
It's not an
Israel.
offering. The slaughter needs to be done
Slaughter.
on the Mount
Sorry.
of Olives. Yeah,
The slaughter has to be done on the Mount of Olives.
right.
But and there are certain areas in Israel where they're more sort of Arab neighborhoods and maybe less security from the IDF. Now, this is just across from the Temple Mount. Is the Mount of Olives a secure place to where if this slaughter was somebody wants to in the future, just looking out, if somebody wants to make that, is it something that's easily accessible that they can do this securely, or is it something that it would be quite a feat to have it happen?
It's going to be quite a feat. It's going to be quite a feat. Uh, Eric, that's a great question. The Mount of Olives is primarily an Arab community. It's just a massive mountain of one after another Arab communities. You slaughter a heifer. It makes a big fire. It's not a little. It's going.
Right.
It's going to be in the hands of God. People ask me all the time, like the Temple Mount, what's going to happen to the Dome of the Rock? I have no idea. All I know is that area is going to be where the temple is going to be, and
Right.
people will say, oh well, then maybe they can move it a little bit. No, God's not going to share the Temple Mount with Islam. Okay,
Right.
people that become believers in God are welcome to come and participate there, but not other religions. Okay, and so my answer to what's going to happen to the Dome of the Rock, I don't know. God's going to have
Yeah.
to take care of it, and He will. Same thing with the red heifer. They have to slaughter it at that location, and for the likes of me, I can't figure out how that they're going to do it, but I know that it'll be done. I know that God's got that in His plans and everything. People will say, well, if these red heifers disqualify all of them right now, there was a word came out that all of them had disqualified, but it was incorrect. Temple Institute came back and they corrected the statement and said 2 are still qualified. But
Okay.
we're
Good to
going to get
know.
a red heifer when it's God's timing, and everything will
Um,
be in place and it'll be done in the correct way.
Yeah, very interesting. I have heard also that now that we have 5, even if we've lost a few, they are still available to breed. And now we
Yes.
have a sort of a breeding machine. So whether it's within this year or next year, we have now the ability to bring a herd. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. That is
Yeah.
correct. And once you get, one slaughter that's kosher and it's done in the correct manner, those ashes would last for decades.
Right.
Okay. They don't have to use a whole lot of ash. They sprinkle ash on top of water, and they know how much that they have to sprinkle at a time. I don't. But they'll take a thing of hyssop, and all they've got to do, and they don't have to sit there and sprinkle you and get you wet. They just have to do what God said and sprinkle you on the 3rd day and the 7th day. And so they'll go a
Yeah.
long ways once they get one.
Right. I guess I have another question. The prophetic significance. Some say the red heifer points to the restoration of the temple worship and prophetic fulfillment, while others claim it's the sign of the so-called temple of the Antichrist.
Well,
How would you respond to these interpretations?
sure. You remember you've celebrated Hanukkah before, I'm sure.
Yes.
And at Hanukkah, uh, we commemorate the rededication of the temple back to Hashem after it had been desecrated by Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay.
Yes.
Well, the false Messiah, who people call the Antichrist. Well, what we're told is that he will come in and desecrate the temple. Okay. And we're told that in the book of Daniel, in chapter 7. We're told it in chapter 10. We're told it in chapter 12. Let's say 7, 11, and 12. It's mentioned in the New Testament in Matthew chapter 24, verse 15. It's in
Yes.
Mark 13:15. It's several places, but it was never called the temple of Antiochus in the past.
Right.
It was always the temple of the Lord that was desecrated. And so that same pattern will be fulfilled again. But it will always be the temple of the Lord. And so,
Right.
yeah, and a very good question. I'm glad you brought that up. That's tremendous.
Yeah.
And the temple is we see. Let me get my New King James here. People say, once Yeshua came, we didn't need the temple anymore. Okay, but I'm going to read in the book of Acts. It states that in chapter 2, verse 46, okay, it says, so continuing daily with one accord in the temple and breaking bread from house to house, they ate their food in gladness and simplicity of heart, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to the congregation daily those who were being saved. Okay, I'm going to go to the book of Acts, chapter 21. Now, Acts 21 is talking about Paul. And Paul has been in Asia Minor, and he's journeying to Jerusalem for the festival of Shavuot, or people might know it as Pentecost. And so we're actually able to get an approximate date of when this chapter occurred. Okay, now how we're able to do that, if you remember the story, Paul gets accused of taking non-Jews into the inner courtyard. It's a false accusation, but he gets arrested. The mob is about to tear him apart because that was, a major thing you didn't do. Non-Jews were not allowed in that inner courtyard. And so the Romans have to come and they get him, and they have him in their possession. And he appeals to they had to transfer him, they had to transfer him from Jerusalem to Caesarea. And that's where he's going to address himself before the Roman governor, Felix. And so we know all of that happened within a matter of months. Now, during that time, as we read that, he's going to be there for over a year, but Felix is going to be replaced by a new ruler, Festus. And we know the approximate date is between 57 and 58 Common Era that they changed offices. Okay, so Yeshua was slain and resurrected in the year 30 Common Era. He was actually born in 4 BCE. Okay, so in 30 Common Era, he's resurrected. So if we go from 30 Common Era, or people would say 30 AD, to 57, 58 Common Era, that's at least 27, 28 years, right? Okay?
Yeah.
Now, Paul, along with the apostles, are the main writers of the New Testament. And so in Acts 21, he goes in and he goes before James. James would have been, his Hebrew name would have been Yaakov. He's the half brother of Yeshua, and he is the president or the Nasi of the congregation of believers in Jerusalem. Okay, and so it says on the following day, Paul went in with us to James, to Yaakov, and all the elders were present. Now, those elders, I don't know who all the elders were, but I'm going to say it certainly would have included all the living and present Shlechim, apostles. Okay, so when he greeted them, he told in detail those things which God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. When they heard it, they glorified the Lord, and they said to him, you see, brother, how many myriads of Jews there are who have believed, And they're all zealous for the Torah, but they have been informed about you that you teach all the Jews among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children. That's a Torah commandment, nor to walk according to the customs. That is the lowest level of what we call the oral law. In other words, you are fully Torah observant as a Jew. What then? The assembly must certainly meet, for they will hear that you have come. Therefore, do what we tell you. We have 4 men who have taken a vow. Okay. Now, that's a Nazarite vow. If you go back to Acts 18, you'll see that Paul had taken a Nazarite vow. It says, take them, be purified with them, and pay the expenses so that they may shave their heads, and that all may know that those things of which they were informed concerning you are nothing, but that you yourself also walk orderly and keep the Torah. If you go back to Numbers, I think it's chapter 6, it gives you the laws of the Nazarite and the offerings that they have to bring when they come out of that vow.
Right.
I'm going to go to verse 26. Paul took the men, next day having been purified with them, entered the temple to announce the expiration of the days of purification, at which time an offering should be made for each one of them. I have a question. We see them 27, 28 years after Yeshua is resurrected, still participating in the temple. Number two, we see them still making animal offerings. And people, and this is to our discredit, people don't understand what the offerings were about. They think that when Yeshua came, all of that stopped. It didn't stop. Otherwise, we wouldn't have Acts 21 where it says they were doing it. And
Right.
in Acts 24, when Paul is speaking before Felix, he says, now after many years, I came to bring alms and offerings for my nation. You look up the word for offerings there. It is the Greek word for korbanot. Okay. In other words, he was bringing offerings, participating in the temple.
Right. So this would go contrary to maybe popular tradition that
Yes.
that Yeshua died and resurrected, and all believers stopped anything to do with the temple. And this
Right.
clearly says that's not true.
That's not true.
And again, the korban offerings are to draw us closer to Hashem, and there's nothing wrong with being drawn closer. I think also there's another scripture that when Yeshua heals a leper, and he says, now go and do what the priests tell you to do, which again, there is an
Yes.
offering that they need to make, and that there is a process that they need to do so that they can become drawn closer to Hashem and not be left outside the camp anymore now that you're cleansed. So if there is this absolute disdain for what they're doing, this is a barbaric practice, for instance, then why would Yeshua himself tell them
Right.
to go and to do those things? So clearly, again, this isn't something that men made up. This is very specific that Hashem gave up Moses and told us how to draw nearer to him. It's a beautiful thing, and it's not this ancient barbaric or pagan ritual here.
You're exactly correct. And we have been involved. There's been a lot of replacement theology that has come in, and a lot of God's festivals have been replaced with things that came from other cultures and so forth. And one of the things that was part of replacement theology is we don't need the temple. And the temple doesn't bring righteousness. The temple is going to teach us on the everything that deals with God. It's like the university of God's word. And so, it's just a tremendous thing. I've spent over 30 years studying the temple as intensely as I could. And I've got to say, it's increased my understanding and belief in all of God's word. And I think of that in that I see the role of the Messiah and how it plays out. It doesn't take away; it adds to and amplifies, gives elucidation. It's a dream come true to learn of God's temple and
Yeah.
and all of that. Yes.
Joe, I think that you have been teaching for so long, and I know your books are amazing, your videos are amazing. For those who are watching, and for right now, they just jumped onto this video and they've been watching about the red heifer because they wanted to learn a little bit more. But if they want to learn about the temple, the patterns of the temple, the oral Torah and what the sages say about the temple, and there's so much to learn from all of this. What are some prime resources? How can they watch some of your videos? Where can they learn more about Hatikva Ministries? And if they wanted to get involved with the temple, what are some good resources for us to get actual data and not this sensationalized stuff that we're watching on YouTube?
Okay. Well, first thing, on how to get a hold of our materials, you can go to Jerusalem Temple Study, all one word.com. And we have a members site. There are things that you can join for free. We've got numbers of things. We do tours to Israel, and there's quite a bit of information there. A lot of things that I did on God's Learning Channel, and before and after. And now there is a website that I would recommend. It's a Jewish website called Sepharia, Sefaria. And there you can find a wealth of Jewish resources, such as Jewish translations of the Tanakh, the the Mishnah, the Talmud, both editions, the Talmud Babli or Babylonian and the Talmud Yerushalmi or Jerusalem. And there are other commentaries that are there, and they've got a tremendous site. It doesn't cost anything to go to, and they only use good, credible materials. And so I would highly recommend Sepharia. For a lot of your general information, just on customs and Chabad has excellent website that you can go to each week's Parsha or Torah reading. There are commentaries by Rashi and many others you can take advantage of there. One thing that you need to really be careful about is that you get good sources, as you mentioned on the websites or the internet. There's a lot of good, but there's also a lot of material that's not. Um, the archaeology is one of the main sources that we look, and the Biblical Archaeological Society of the United States and their magazine Bar is good. Um, the the papers that are from the top archaeologists. If you go to a site, um, I'm trying to think of what the site is. Academia. It has Israel's greatest archaeologists are going to publish papers. You can actually download full books and things. Um, we have frequently we have seminars that we do on the temple, and people might want to check in to see when these seminars are going to be, where they're going to be located, and we're always very anxious to share with people. There's a lot. Let me show a book here. Now, this would not help most of the people, okay, but it is a sign of the times. Um, it's a Meor Panim. It's a book in Hebrew. You can see it's all in Hebrew, but I want to show something. It's on the showbread, okay?
Wow.
And they
Yeah.
have discovered exactly. I attended a seminar last year in Israel, where the baker, he's works with the Temple Institute. He got with other scholars, and they worked on answering the questions of how this bread was made. And so they have seminars that you can go to, and the seminars take about 4 hours. And they are the most fascinating thing. You actually get to participate in making the breads. You learn the laws concerning the breads. You get to eat some of them. We got to see the actually um, he baked one of the showbread loaves, and oh, it was an exciting thing to see. But there are seminars that where you can go in Israel and you can see where they're making the parokhet, the veils, um, the priestly garments, all the various vessels for the temple. But there's tremendous things that are coming out. We're hoping to put together a list of places for people to go for information. And I'll let y'all know when we get that list made up, and y'all can put it out where people can have the resources.
Yeah, awesome. That was great. Thank you so much, Joe, for joining us. This was just an incredible study. I know for a lot of us who have had questions about it and all the sensationalism, it's great to hear from somebody who's dedicated their life to studying these things, to come on the show and help us set the record straight. We really appreciate it, Joe, for all your time. Was there any last thoughts before we say goodbye?
No, I just look forward to meeting more of the people, and I love to hear questions from the people about what's really happening.
Awesome. Well, we will make sure that we connect again soon. And if you haven't, if you're, I'm sure you're a regular here on GLC, you watch Joe all the time, and he always comes up with new updates. I'm sure if there's any new news, especially with the Red Heifer, that you'll get on and give us a live alert, right, Joe?
I'll do that. I'll make a point of it.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Again, come on to glc.com. Look at all of our show that we offer on GLC TV. And don't forget that we have a bookstore. Check out our books online and look for different resources. Thank you again for this evening, and we'll see you next time. Shalom, everyone.